Sup lifters, today was Sunday, and as you know, Sunday is my day of active recovery slash the day which I mainly foam roll or work on my mobility or just fix my technique, and that's what I did today. I did my high pulls since it's an exercise that I want to kind of learn, and then I worked on my deadlift technique because, as you know, I pulled 145. However, I kind of felt like my back was rounding, and NH made an amazing video on the deadlift and how he also ended up actually pulling up the weight with, as he called him, a cat back deadlift, right? So when your back is rounded, which is bad technique. And I kind of got inspired by it, meaning that he has been extremely honest with himself, and it's also what I want to do. However, I am not certain whether I did that or not. So when in doubt, I decided, okay, let's focus on fixing it, even though it might not be broken, because I might still notice something interesting, and something interesting I found. So I'm gonna talk about the deadlift when the time will come. So right now I just did my high pulls, and you can see that I'm pulling very high actually. You know, the idea is to basically pull until the nipple line, and I think that the main mistake that I'm doing is that I'm pulling with my arms, which I think is normal for me because Olympic weightlifters don't really use arms. They just stabilize and are ropes. However, from this hip hinged position, what I usually do are either Romanian deadlifts, in which the arms do not do anything, or I do rows. And in the rows, you still gotta pull with your arms, right? You're still mainly engaging your back, but you still use your arms. So I kind of thought about it. I also kind of played around, you know, because it was an extremely light session. I just went down to have some fun and move my body. And you can see that I'm gonna start raising the weight, and there will be a moment, kind of an eureka moment, in which I will realize, oh wow, so this is the movement pattern. And how I visualize it is I start with my hips and I explode, I then push with my feet in order to also use my calves. After I did that, I should shrug the weight, and then everything is okay. I don't need to do anything else. That was a good rep. This was a good rep, from what I understand of the exercise, since I'm not extremely extremely green to the exercise. Also, you can see how important it is to have an equal grip on both sides, because as you can see, my right arm is way wider than my left one, which is why the barbell isn't standing perfectly horizontally. And also there is something weird that sometimes happens, which is after I repeat the exercise for a certain amount of time, since I'm still not primed to the movement and I still have to kind of remind to myself what I need to do, sometimes this mechanism completely fries and I don't understand anything, and I basically stand there with the barbell in my hands and I'm kind of thinking, okay, so which comes first, hips and then what? So I did a couple of reps now with 40 kilograms, and I feel like that the exercise is decently clean, meaning that it kind of is starting to resemble a high pull. Again, I'm not an expert of this exercise. This is the second time that I try to ever do it, and I believe this was a good set, if I remember correctly, because it was the last one, and I was kind of tired. So you will see that right now I'm able to basically pull towards my nipple line, and you will see that slowly but surely the bar keeps going slower and slower, and I'm charging up, because you can see that I'm hip hinging and then I'm exploding, and yet the bar isn't really coming up a lot. And yeah, it's a really fun exercise actually, and also it kind of leaves you I don't want to say like without breath, because that is not the case. However, you can kind of feel that it's different from doing a bodybuilding exercising, because you keep exploding. It's more similar to a sprint, although not as intense, since there are slight pauses, so it's much more similar to that rather than deadlifts. Okay, now this was a good deadlift. However, I am not sure if it is because of my t-shirt on, which is why I couldn't see my back, or if it was actually quite good. So at the end of everything, you will see that I picked 4 positions which I want to talk about, and that is when we are gonna mainly focus about those 4 positions which I believe are key, because the main important thing for me is basically the setup for the deadlift, because I have very long femurs. So what's the problem? Number one, I need to basically push my knees forward, and I really need to use as much dorsiflexion as I can. which again, it is something extremely important for weightlifting. Why? Because if I do not push my knee forward, my hips are gonna sit even more back. And the more my hips are back, the more my body tends to, how do I say it? Basically, the more my hips are back, the more my upper body is parallel to the floor. However, we want to have our body not exactly parallel, while keeping a back straight, however. And the position, I agree, that should not be comfortable. However, since I have these very long femurs, I should try to basically push my knees as far in front as I can and do not use and avoid using shoes. Since I'm already gifting myself at least 3 centimeters. The tatami blocks are 4 centimeters, however, the weight kind of pushes down on it. I tried that semi-sumo stance, which is basically a sumo stance but very kind of close, but it still didn't feel good on my adductor, so I just completely ditched it. I then kept pulling and pulling, and I kind of focused on different stuff. And here I tried to actually pull from the floor. And you can see that the position isn't exactly too bad from when I start with, okay? Because you see, the back is very parallel to the floor. However, it is still not a stiff leg deadlift. For those who don't know, a stiff leg deadlift is very similar to a conventional deadlift. The difference, however, is that the knee stands basically behind the forearm, okay? However, in the conventional, the knee should basically be at the same length as your forearm, meaning that the top of your knees and the top of your forearm are aligned. As you can see, my forearm is on the side of the knee. It's not extremely in front of the knee. Again, you can see it there. So why is this episode called like this? Because I'm fighting for every single inch that I can get. And what am I doing? I'm basically trying to optimize my starting position as much as I can. So I basically focus on keeping my arms as straight as I can and my legs as wide as I can without having them kind of becoming annoying while I try to actually pull. Because the wider my legs are, the lower my hips become, okay? Because I'm having a larger stance, and really it's a question of centimeters, of millimeters even, inches. It's not a lot. However, every single one makes a difference. And that is why I call the episode like this, which I feel like is one of the best titles so far. So, let's talk about these 4 pictures. This is the first one, which is my starting position when I deadlifted the first time with my shirt on. And as you can see, the back seems extremely straight, and I also believe that it's clearer because the light isn't exactly reflecting on my skin, as you will see in the other 4 pictures that I chose. So I feel like the position is okay. My feet are quite narrow, so I feel like I can actually pull them a little bit in a more wide position, which would allow me to gain a couple of more centimeters. The arms I feel like are perfectly, because the shoulder is slightly in front of the bar as it should be. My thoracic extension is there. When I pull the slack out of the bar, it just comes up and it keeps flying. What I am kind of concerned with is the fact that I'm actually also using the shoes, which actually give me a couple of more centimeters in height, maybe even 1 centimeter, just millimeters. But as I said, we're really talking about small numbers. So I believe that I should completely ditch the shoes if I want to pull conventional, and I should keep my leg as far apart as I can. Moving on the next picture, we have me in my ideal position. This is what actually feels comfortable for me, meaning that if I could pull this back position and everything else, so if I could hold my bar in my hands, that will be an extremely comfortable starting position. However, I also agree with people that say that when you're braced and you're keeping a back straight, ready to basically pull the weight up, that should not feel comfortable, because you are bracing, you are packing your lats, you are pulling the slack out of the bar, you're creating tension, so there is no way that you're gonna just feel extremely comfortable. What I also kind of thought about, and I'm not sure if that is kind of okay, is basically, and also like it makes sense in theory, however I don't know if it's actually practical and if it actually gives me any advantage, because we must still think about the context of bodybuilding, which is basically holding the weight in just my fingers, okay? So if I extended my fingers, you understand that I will gain a couple of centimeters. Although that would actually reduce my range of motion, which again is something important for bodybuilding, because the bigger the range of motion is, the more muscles we're hitting, and we use deadlift as almost a full body exercise. So that is also the reason why some people say that pulling sumo for bodybuilders makes no sense, since sumo is a position which has extremely good leverages for pulling the weight up. However, the range of motion is much lower. There is an extremely interesting video of Calgary Barbell regarding the difference between how much the bar actually travels between sumo and conventional, and I'm gonna leave it linked down below, which is pretty interesting. So I really think that I should pull conventional, and I need to understand how to keep that position which is uncomfortable even when the weight is higher, because as long as I'm pulling up 60 kilograms, I mean, I can do it with my eyes closed. I don't really need to do anything because the weight is so light, okay? Moving on the next picture, we have this one, which is a direct follow-up of the last one, which is the same position. However, right now I'm holding the bar, so I'm in that more uncomfortable position. And as you can see, it's really hard to understand because, number one, I have some fat on my lower back, which makes it seem like there is some kind of curvature. However, you can also see the shade of my spine, okay? So basically the small cavity in the middle of your back, which seems to be turning at the real bottom of the movement. Sorry, at the real bottom of the spine. However, I also believe that it is normal, because otherwise we will need to keep like how do I explain it? If we didn't have a slight curvature in the bottom of our spine, we wouldn't have the shape of the spine that we have as human beings, okay? So I still believe that the position is okay, but I am not sure, since I do not have enough experience. And then we have the last one, which again, I feel like the back is straight, because when I do Romanian deadlifts and I reach the bottom position, my back, I still feel like that it is straight. However, you can see that right now, I lost those 4 centimeters of the tatamis, and my back is even more parallel to the floor. However, that is just due to my anatomy, okay? It's because I have those super long hips, because, sorry, not hips, femurs. If you think about it, if my thigh were a little bit shorter, or perhaps my tibia was a little bit higher, in that way I'm not exactly losing centimeters in height, you kind of understand how my back would be able to basically keep a more upright position, and I would also be able to pull from a more, let's say, leveragingly speaking, advantageous position, okay? So I'm gonna still keep pulling from the tatamis, just because I cannot drop on the floor all that weight, okay? Like, my parents simply told me to don't do that, so I don't have an option. Although I would like to just train from this height. If I did that, however, I would need to control the descent, which would make me sandbag a lot, because you need a lot of strength to actually control the descent of a movement like this, especially in the bottom position. And really, you don't need a lot of like distance for the weight to get heavy. I mean, it gets heavy fast because it's already a pretty heavy load. So that is it for today's video. See you guys tomorrow.